welcome to Protecting Your Investments. My name's Johnny, and I'm going to be your host. This is brought to you by Lemonian Dryout and Foundation Repair. We've been proudly serving Kansas for the last 50 years and look forward to continue serving Kansas. So let me give you a brief history of Lemonian and an overview of the podcast. So we do have full-length podcasts. Those are kind of what you would typically see. We have a few episodes that you can go watch if you would like. I highly recommend it. They're very informative. And that's kind of the goal of this podcast. We want to inform you on things to look out for or that you can do for your home to help prevent or mitigate damage when it does happen. So what do we do as a company, and why should we tell you how to take care of those issues, I guess? So we've been, like I said, in business for 50 years. We focus on the dry out portion, which is going to be water intrusion from any category of water, which we're going to cover a little bit about today. We also do mold remediation, which is going to be once the mold's already there, we know how to safely and properly clean it up, which is going to be one of our future episodes. We're going to hopefully do a full length and some other informative things. And then, of course, we have our foundation repair side, and we do pretty much anything from leveling your house back out and lifting it out of the ground if it's falling in there. Because if you're like we've been here in Kansas for the last, year and a half, we've had a lot of really dry season, and it's been long, and that causes houses to settle and sink more. We also do crack repairs on those and anything dealing with the foundation. We can put in anchors, whalers, so on and so forth. Go watch the episode that I have previously on our foundation repair side for some more information on that. And we're going to be doing another one of these slightly shorter podcasts focusing on specific things that we do, just more informational. A little bit more of a deep dive, if you will. So when it comes to water, like we're talking about today, we've got 3 categories of water. And so your category 1 water, as you can see there, is going to be clean water. That means it's coming from a source that you would drink from. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that water is okay to drink once it's on the ground. Actually, there's some really interesting stuff I'm going to go over. So as most people know, there's very little fresh water on the planet that you can actually drink that doesn't have to go through a desalinization process because of the salt water. And almost all water found naturally has to be purified some way, somehow. So that would be considered potable water. And a lot of times our potable water is going to go through water treatment. Chemicals are added to it. And those chemicals are simply to kill off the things that are living in the water that could be harmful to anyone. Could be harmful to anyone. Animals are a little different because they have, I would say, a little bit better digestive system when it comes to clearing out some of those parasites. But I'm not a vet, and that's not what we're really talking about. But category 2 water is going to be gray water. Now, I don't really like when people say gray water because then people are thinking the water's actually going to be gray. Remember, when we're talking about the categories, this is simply a contamination level. Category 1, clean water, it's a contamination level. It would come from a potable source. Again, that is going to be a fresh water line to your sink. That's going to be a fresh water line in your wall. Now, gray water, it's got that washing machine, and that's why I chose this, is because that would be a contaminated water that would come from something like a washing machine. I guess you could possibly consider water from a dishwasher as a category 2 water, but I would almost argue that that's going to be category 3, and that's because category 3 or black water is going to be grossly contaminated. So just as a recap, of those water categories, category 1 is going to originate from a sanitary water source. Category 2 is going to have significant contamination. That's going to come from, like I said, the laundry. Water intrusion from outside is going to be considered category 2, and in some circumstances category 3, and you start to kind of see where we can get some of those kind of in betweens. So category 2 is where you start seeing unsafe levels of bacteria, virus, mold, or nutrients for microorganisms or other contaminants. Category 3 being that black water or grossly contaminated water, it already contains those. It contains pathogens, it contains viruses, it contains all the nasty stuff. And usually when we're talking category 3 water, the first thing that people are going to associate with the category 3 water loss is going to be sewage. But before we kind of get into more of what do we consider that category 3 and why it's so dangerous, let's talk about what's in that water. And we're specifically going to focus on category 3 water for a few different reasons I'll explain here in a little bit. So there are a lot of things that live inside of category 3 water. If you've ever changed out your toilet yourself or been there when the plumber has changed out your toilet, you know that there are actually things that live inside of your drain that you can see with the naked eye. And this is going to be the form of bugs and all different kinds of stuff. There's a reason it smells. There's a reason that the color has changed. There's a lot of living organisms inside of that. And right here on the screen, you can see microorganisms found in sewage, nematodes, so different types of worm, tapeworms. Most people know what a tapeworm is. Like if you go to certain countries, they will tell you not to drink the water. You can get tapeworms. That's because that water is considered grossly contaminated if it's not filtered properly. And this is a good reminder. If anyone's ever played the game Oregon Trail, you died from dysentery a lot on the Oregon Trail. And all dysentery is that means a type of bacteria, usually from some sort of animal feces, human feces, could be other things too. Those are kind of common, but it's contaminated your water source. So if you're drinking water from a river and you've got somebody that's riding horses upstream, even a few miles, and that horse drops droppings, as they do, in that water, or a deer, or insert pretty much any animal crossing that river, a bear, you can contract that bacteria from it. And dysentery there's so many negative effects of dysentery. And most people know because it's going to give you diarrhea and eventually it will kill you. So when we consider that, the fact that sometimes people want to treat their sewage loss inside of their home in a different way than you would treat river water in a place you don't live is crazy. And you should always consider when it comes to sewage loss, okay? A sewage loss is a fire cell. Everything must go. Now, it can be argued that you can clean and sanitize and treat hardwoods. And I would say that is true to a certain degree. You're going to have to sand them. You're going to have to treat them. They're going to have to be dried out properly. I personally don't even know. I mean, if it was a stud in a wall, yeah, okay. If it's a coffee table that I'm going to touch and my kids are going to touch, no. That's just not something that I would personally want to risk. Now, if it's a hardwood coffee table that, grandpa gave us or made or something like that, you can sand that wood down, you can strip it, stand it, lacquer it, restain it, encapsulate it, seal it. And that way there's a lot of barrier protections and there's not going to be anything possibly getting through that wood. And that's where the concern is, because Just like anything else, these things are extremely small. And when I say like anything else, when you're dealing with water, obviously you're generally not seeing like a protozoa is much larger than a virus, but you still can't see a protozoa with the naked eye. Funguses, those spores, just like a mold spore, is still larger than a virus, but you're not seeing it with the naked eye. And so just consider anytime that something goes beyond that trap, the trap meaning your toilet, your sink, um, a lot of commercial properties, or maybe even inside of some homes, you've got a floor drain. Anytime that water goes in that and back out, it is now considered grossly contaminated water. And it needs to be treated with that same respect. So let's talk about some other things that are inside of water and why you have to be so careful when you clean it up. Now, I want to preface this by saying we never recommend a homeowner clean up any type of grossly contaminated water themselves. And it's for a few reasons. Like I said, the protozoas are in there. You've got nematodes, bacteria. You've also got bloodborne pathogens, bloodborne viruses, hepatitis, pretty much anything you can think of, polio virus. So these are not something that you want to be messing around with. They can make you extremely sick. And we always have to remember there are three main avenues for contamination in the human body. The first being dermal. That's your skin. Your skin is a natural barrier, yes. But even like on my hands, working, maybe I go out and I'm doing something in the garden, or I'm putting up a shed, or heck, I'm just doing dishes and I get a small cut on my hand. Well, now that dermal protection is penetrated. That makes getting those viruses and bacteria and all that nastiness inside your body way easier. And that's just not something we want to deal with. So dermal protection is an absolute must. And you're dealing with a substance, your body is naturally porous. So if you get that water on you that's contaminated and it's able to seep into your pores, you can still get it that way too. That's why our guys, when they go out, they're suiting up. Those suits are hot. They're uncomfortable. I promise you, I've been in them. But it's not a risk that we're willing to take, and it's not a risk you should take either. So, and again, I'm going to come back to, we highly recommend never cleaning up sewage water on your own, or really any water on your own, because you could miscategorize that water, which we're going to get to. Another way that you're going to intake these viruses or any kind of contaminant is through mucous membranes, through the eyes, through the mouth. And I know you're probably going to say, but Johnny, I'm not going to go lick the surface. You're right. But if you're cleaning something and it splashes in your eye or your mouth, well, you might as well have licked it. Or you don't get your hands clean enough, or you touch something and then it goes to your face. Everybody's got their cell phone. Everybody loves having their cell phone with them. And it's incredible because people will sit there, and I've actually seen this on a loss. They will sit there and suck up water with a shop vac, or had been sucking up water with a shop vac, take a phone call, stick that phone to their face, put it away, put it in their pocket. You just contaminated your face. So what's the third way that this stuff can get in your body? Well, that's through breathing it. And I know what a lot of people are probably going to say, well, it's in the water. I'm not snorkeling. I'm not swimming in it. I certainly hope you're not. That's pretty gross. But one of the first things that people naturally want to do, because we know that air movement will help get rid of water. So one of the things people want to do is they want to grab the shop vac and they want to grab some sort of fan. Just like you learned in school Your water evaporates, turns into a cloud, all that stuff comes back down. Well, when you're evaporating this water source that is grossly contaminated, all you're doing is taking these viruses and these small organisms that are very dangerous to you, and you're now aerosolizing them to where you can breathe it in, and you're still going to intake that virus or bacteria or what have you. So that's where knowing how to properly not only clean it up, categorize the water, but also the steps to follow. So what we have to do when we come in, and what any professional restoration company should be doing, if you're not in our state and we don't for whatever reason service your area, and you have questions, I want you to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help. We're more than happy to answer those questions, because it's so important that your structure get taken care of properly and the job get taken care of properly. Because if you have someone that doesn't really know what they're doing, and I certainly hope if they're a good, reputable restoration company, they know what they're doing, they're following IICRC standards for cleaning that up. But if they don't, all they're doing is putting themselves at risk and you at risk, because that air is going to circulate through your house. And your filtration system in your house is not going to stop it. Viruses are extremely small. They're smaller than mold spores, and most air conditioning filters don't stop mold spores. They can't, because if you have that level of restriction, you wouldn't have any airflow. You just burn up motors in your HVAC system. Now, obviously, dust, particles, stuff like that, yes, those filters should be capturing most of those, and that will help cut down on the spread of stuff, so on and so forth. But what we have to do when we go in is we're going to clear all that water out. We're going to treat that surface. We're trying to get it back to a category 1. We want to clean that surface and get rid of all that nasty stuff that we possibly can before we ever start the dry out process. We have to, because again, we don't want to aerosolize any of this stuff. We don't want to move it into the air. So a lot of people have a really hard time when it comes to categorizing water. And let me explain why. I'm going to go on to this next slide. So in this next slide, that looks like clean water. That looks like it's coming from some sort of clean water source, because you can see through it. And again, this is why I don't necessarily like when we say clean water, gray water, black water, because the color of the water isn't naturally going to dictate what category water it actually is. And the reason is because just having those protozoas, nematodes, bacteria, viruses in there isn't naturally going to change the water. The water's color is going to change because of what else it comes in contact with when it comes back out. Now, this is actually a sewage loss. It's category 3 water, but it's because it's coming out of a trap. It's not going down and in and flowing, but it is coming from beyond the trap. And so that's where we start to run into some issues, because normally what people think when they think of category 3 water loss is they're thinking of that. They're thinking poop on the floor. They're thinking, toilet paper. Everything's really soaked. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be the large chunks of debris. It doesn't. Most are going to have an odor. You can generally identify a category 3 water loss by the odor, even if it is not. You can't see the water necessarily. You're probably going to smell it before you see it, which sounds really gross. But let me cover just a few things real quick that just inhaling sewage backup can cause, and this can be really quick effects. Remember, if you're able to smell it, that means you're breathing in some level of contamination. So some of the common exposure symptoms is going to be nausea, vomiting, fatigue, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, dizziness and headaches, uh, lack of concentration, and even a fever. And generally, fevers are accompanying a virus because your body spikes a fever to kill off that virus because it's trying to increase and burn it out. So again, guys, it's just not something to really mess around with. We never recommend a homeowner really clean up any category of water for a lot of different reasons. If you go back and watch one of the episodes that we did that was kind of a full-length episode, Dustin was on. Dustin's our water mitigation manager, and he's got tons of experience. I think he's pushing right around 20 years of experience in the restoration industry. And he likes to call, there's two types of water. There's smart water and dumb water. They're both playing hide and seek. And dumb water is going to stand out in the middle of the floor and you're going to see it and you're going to suck it up. Well, smart water is going to find its way to hide, usually in wall cavities, behind things, under things, and get absorbed in that sheetrock. And a good rule of thumb that any restoration company should be following is you're going to generally go about a foot above the flood line, as we call it, just because that water is going to wick up. The water will wick up in any type of material along those lines. It's a sponge essentially. So again, calling a professional restoration company that has the right equipment, knows what they're doing, knows how to measure and monitor that dry out process once they've got it all the way back to a category 1 and they've cleaned up all that sewage, they've treated the area, they've washed it, they've scrubbed it, they've done all that good stuff. Monitoring that drying process is extremely important too, because we want to make sure we get everything dried out. Now, sewage water contains a lot of nutrients in it that are really ideal for mold growth too. So you've got a compounding issue at that point, but we're not really talking about mold as much now. But again, it's something to remember and to keep in mind that a water loss, any category of water loss, can easily turn into a mold issue. And that's something that we see a lot too, unfortunately, when people try to take care of stuff themselves. They don't get it dried out properly, they miss an area, and then they start noticing that mold growth. And usually it's going to be odorous at first, and then they're going to see or suspect just from the odor that they have some issue that's going to be bigger. And generally, especially depending on the category of water, it can be more costly to have that mold growth, and it's definitely detrimental to your health. So if you guys have any questions or if you need any help, if you have a water loss and it's an area, again, that we don't service and you just want to make sure that things are being done properly or you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. It's 1-800-528-5535, or you can go to lemunyon.com and you can check out our website. We've got a ton of stuff in our about section. We've got a blog, lots of good information in there. And you can always just give us a call, and we're more than happy to go through and try to help you in that process. Most people don't know what to expect in a water loss or really any of the services we offer if they've never been through it before. So we do want to genuinely help. And if you're in Kansas and you need something, feel free, please give us a call. And we'll definitely come out and get you taken care of. All right, guys, till next time, have a good one.